Speaker for today is Mr. Parth Bhavsar, Manager, Category Management Kitchen, Amazon Inn. Mr. Bhavsar has completed his post-graduation from IIM Ahmedabad. He comes with a rich 8 years plus of experience in the e-commerce industry, managing sports, fitness, grocery, fashion, and kitchen verticals. He is currently working as a manager, category management, handling the kitchen and dining portfolio in Amazon India Marketplace. A big round of applause for Mr. Parth Bhavsar. Welcome.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining the session. I'm Parth. We'll be taking the discussion forward on emerging trends in the kitchen industry, especially in the light of e-commerce as a vertical, right? So, what are basically the key themes that we've observed so far? We'll try to keep the discussion concise on uh, two key aspects. One is what are the themes or observations or trends that we are looking at. The other part coming to if some of us have to use this as part of building our business, how can we basically do that? So that'll be the focus of this discussion. Uh, just a second. Okay, so let me first start by breaking the myth around when we typically look at e-commerce participants, right? We would typically look at a particular profile of individuals or profile of uh, uh, contributors in the value chain, right? We would typically think of, hey, this is meant for the brands, or this is meant for, let's say, a certain specific type of manufacturers. But probably the first piece that we have to look at is that overall e-commerce as a landscape or as a channel of doing business is technically relevant for everyone, all the way from somebody who's a brand owner to a manufacturer to somebody who is just an importer or an exporter or somebody who's a distributor retailer as well, right? So and how this sort of helps like a few set of key themes that you will be able to leverage is uh, reach out to the entire base of customers, especially sitting in distant areas where, let's say, the serviceability becomes a challenge. If there are things which you are able to innovate, there was always this problem of catchment area in terms of, hey, I could only address so much, or the infrastructure that is required becomes a hassle. So some of these aspects are the advantages of the channel which it brings in, and that's something which then makes it relevant for technically every player, and they can all use the entire e-commerce landscape in their own ways, to put it that way. Uh, I'll probably start with the most extreme one in terms of manufacturers, right? Typically, we've looked at manufacturers as somebody who would typically focus on their core competency of getting the best quality product out, and then the respective other functions of distribution, retailing, going to the customer, collecting feedback is sort of left to the other partners, right? But this is where and this comes from a trend that we've observed this year is that, or over the last 2 to 3 years, that we've seen some of the OEMs who were doing brilliant in their respective fields, were just focusing on either manufacturing for domestic market or exporting, have now come up with their own brands and they are able to scale it big. And some of these brands have become online first and then moving to offline. So the order may vary. Some have started an offline, tried on to scale up online. The others have started in online, seen success, scaled it in offline. But the discussion comes to what are the key ingredients, or why, how can it help, right? So the first piece being around the feedback or product trial that you can do. So because this channel is nimble, you can launch the product initially, test it out directly with the customers, get feedback, make changes, relaunch, make improvements. This entire piece around nimbleness of the ecosystem is something that is helpful. You don't need a full-fledged investment in that way when you are going ahead. The other part is from the amount of feedback which comes in, because you get straight away customer reviews right from the end consumer rather than it flowing through certain channel partners. It becomes easier for you to assimilate that. You get direct analytics, and some of these aspects basically help you to scale. The other aspect which also comes in is purely coming from the nimbleness of things. There are certain product categories which require a lot of customization. For example, let's say customers are looking for a water bottle printed with their name. Now it's sort of operationally difficult to have X number of setups with the respective local catchment areas where you will be able to offer this. So some of these centralized projects, or let's say where there are seasonal assortments which have to be offered. So let's say it's a so you are, let's say, a manufacturer of mugs, but you just want to offer a specific packaging for Raksha Bandhan, or let's say a gifting occasion like let's say Valentine's Day. So some of these nimble aspects or aspects around tweaking your portfolio become relevant here, right? And that's one aspect where we've seen people who are up in the value chain have now come in. They've been able to successfully interact with the customers and have tried to build their brands. Based on success, they have also gone and expanded their offerings across other sort of other channels of operation, right, including offline and general and monitoring thereof. Moving on, so the other trend that we are observing out here is around the premium products. And first of all, let me define how I'm looking at premium, right? So premium can have three dimensions. One is a case where you as a customer are trying to buy something which is a different category or a category upgrade. So let's say somebody moving from a gas stove to a hob would be a category upgrade or a different product type which you offer as you move up in terms of the product laddering. The other avenue is obviously about the material or the specs, in which case you would probably move from a stainless steel dinnerware to, let's say, a ceramic or a stoneware, or let's say a non-stick to a cast iron in terms of, or a tri-ply in terms of material type when you're looking at cookware. Right? So some of these trends are more on the spec part of it, and the third, which is a related one, is more about international brands or customers willing to pay even for the domestic brands which are offering a premium offering. Customers are willing to spend that extra for a better quality, while the spec and the feature and the product type may still remain the same. The quality aspects of it, or the product specifications are something that end up becoming better, right? And now this is where I also want to bring in why some of this has been easier when we look at e-commerce as a channel, right? So most of these items are relatively low throughput, high configuration or assortment, right? So you typically have, let's say, a huge assortment or a variety, because when the customer is looking for premium, he or she is looking for a very specific ask in terms of, hey, I want this color, this size, this specification. Also, the value of the product is high, so it's not going to be fast moving in a regular scheme of things. Now, in the light of this, if it comes about storing the product or retailing this through, let's say, the traditional channels, it becomes difficult because the inventory holding, etc., becomes a challenge. In the e-commerce landscape, some of this has been solved for, where you can store at one location or start with your base location, but you're able to catch up to customers across the country, and hence it becomes a low cost, wider variety model to operate, right? Apart from that, obviously, if these are brands which are coming from elsewhere or there is an established history, then some of the customer reviews, etc., help, because in an e-commerce landscape you've had you see customers coming in, looking at the past feedback from the other counterparts, and then deciding whether to buy or not. And then obviously there are the audio visual supplements that you can give, right? So let's say an image or a description or a video which sort of comes in handy, and that sort of helps you fuel the overall business. And that's where this becomes one of a faster growing sort of segment or trend for us. Moving on, so the other trend or the theme that we are all observing is that now it is nowhere about just buying the essentials, right? So earlier, or let's say when we were looking at maybe 2 or 3 decades back, this category was all about need-based purchase. Like, I need a gas lighter, I will go and buy. So it's more about, I have a very specific need. The discretionary part of it was very limited. One of the key themes that we are observing is categories which are discretionary in nature are basically getting higher penetration. It's almost becoming like the repeat rates or the customers buying more or exploring some of this selection has become more pronounced as time has progressed. And I'll give you a few examples, at least that we are observing in the e-commerce landscape, and these are the categories which are basically growing 2x plus year on year. and defining the trend, right? So when we look at, let's say, cooking overall, right, it's not just about the cooking essentials, but it's going more into cooking as a hobby, looking at, let's say, baking as a hobby. The trends around, let's say, having smart appliances or smart gadgets which could make the cooking easier or better, right? Moving to, let's say, categories like barware were not something that were historically fairly large, and now there's a trend where people are investing, willing to pick this up on a similar lines of serveware, where these categories are big, like even on the dinnerware serveware part, it's not just about having the essentials, right? It's more about, it's almost behaving like a decor sort of theme where people are looking for aesthetic options, more variety. Having multiple dinner sets at home is not just a constraint, right? Earlier it would be probably just one, or let's say the variety that you'll have in terms of what you serve in terms of tabletop categories has again sort of increased, and here customers are willing to have that discretionary spend to buy more. Organizing the home or kitchen is again becoming a storyline. So, especially during festive periods or when people are redoing their homes, or otherwise also as a hobby, uh, redoing, organizing, looking at racks, containers, and multiple aesthetic angles around those are something again which comes out as a trend. Coming to ease of doing things, maybe tools is a category which we can look at, right? So, when we are looking at, let's say, uh, earlier probably you would have looked at just bare minimum set of tools which would help you cook the recipe, and the convenience or ease part of it was something which was very limited or restricted, right? And in the e-commerce space, because and all of us would have witnessed some or the other Instagram reel highlighting a new tool or an innovative product coming out every week, right? Which would basically make things easier, or make the entire process easier. And that's again one piece which sort of comes out, which is around going beyond the bare minimum essentials, or going beyond the need based purchase, right? So these are few of the themes. Now coming to, let's say, when we are looking at adding products or adding selection in the e-commerce landscape, probably what are the things which will help, let's say, a business win, or what are the products which I should start listing on, let's say, e-commerce portals, quick commerce portals, social media platforms, any of these e-commerce sort of landscape, through which I'll have a higher chance of winning, right? And obviously, first part is, across e-commerce, the cost of adding more products or adding more assortment is almost negligible, because technically you can offer everything, and only when a sale comes you end up incurring the transaction cost. Most of the marketplaces, including Amazon, charge you when you make a transaction, right? So hence, offering all the variety that you can obviously makes sense, but it's practically difficult when you try to list everything. So the themes that you can think of or pick up are more around, one, if there are brands or assortment or product type which do not, where you see an obvious gap, right? Which is basically based on your industry learning experience. You think there are certain products which you can pick up; those become the obvious choice. Barring those, the seasonal trends or trends on social media become the additional complementing points which can help you sort of define what product or what range to offer, right? And probably I'll come to this piece on, and this is a business model that we end up using at Amazon. I'm just taking that as a reference point to say this is a typical business model where we look at how do we scale or how do we grow, right? And I'm just trying to put this into the context of all of us when we are looking at, let's say, a partner in the e-commerce process, right? So the way the entire cycle works for us as a marketplace is that when you come as a seller trying to list something, right, the first thing is you would go and try to offer as much assortment or selection as possible, right? Like that becomes your base rock, or the catalog that you bring to the table becomes your starting point for driving the business. From there, you are able to drive the next part would be to focus around the customer experience aspect. So how the listing looks, how the product is being shown on the website, how the packaging is being done so that it goes damage free, and so on. The next piece comes around, once you have the assortment listed and you've nailed the customer experience part, it helps you sort of build traffic overall. The customers would come repeat themselves in terms of visits. The overall marketplace or some of these platforms would actually try to boost your visibility in some way, right? So if you're looking at social media, if you have interesting content, interesting products, some of these just get picked up. If you're looking at e-commerce, some of these products or the algorithms basically help you showcase your products or drive more sales for those, right? And then it obviously goes into a circle where you're able to get scale, optimize, offer or optimize in terms of pricing, or and when I talk about pricing, it's not just about, let's say, the marked price, right? It's the entire piece around how do we make it more affordable. So let's say if it's to do with what exchange values we offer, or what kind of, let's say, per month cost or EMI that we are able to break it down to. Some of these are the traditional levers that we've been using. It's just about putting all of these together in a digital landscape and trying to leverage those. Next, I'll come to some of those things which are specific to Amazon, more of an information around what this has been. This is more of a reference point for you to visualize. We are obviously the largest marketplace that in some of these, in certain categories in this case, and then that becomes a anchor point for you to sort of understand the overall e-commerce landscape, right? So the overall penetration for e-commerce in general, or let's say the number of users, something that's been expanding. We end up offering, and these are a few of the offerings. Most of these are well known for you. But the key ones I want to call out, right? So the catchment area or number of customer that you're able to reach obviously becomes a highlight, right? You're able to start from one place, experiment, take feedback, course correct. So that becomes one key highlight. The analytics part becomes the second one. The third piece I would want to call out is probably around customer reputation or support, and the ability to sort of go and talk back to the same customer, because in some of these digital sort of ecosystems, you always have an opportunity to retarget, upsell some of these aspects, which become difficult when we are talking about an offline landscape. Now I'll come to this, and this is probably the thing. I mean, while the data point is just one, I think I just want to come to how can we build this in a bigger scheme of things, right? So as per data, Amazon has become or emerged as one of the top searched platform when it comes to products, right? So when you're thinking of buying something, all of us have a default reaction of going to one of the e-commerce sites or going to Google and basically checking for product. This basically helps you understand what the product is, what are the key specifications, what would be the general sort of complaints that other customers are making about it, generally what is the price about, so that when I'm going and investing in a shopping behavior, either online or even if I conclude my sale or purchase offline, this is a typical behavior that gets shown by the customer, right? Now, when this comes as a proposition, the interesting part for all of us is going to be to have a presence omni-channel, right? So just having a presence both in online and offline just helps you drive the overall business ecosystem. And how this helps is, let's say when a customer, and the trend thereof, what we are observing is that brands are now looking at e-commerce or some of these platforms not just as a sales channel, but it's more of a marketing channel, brand building channel, right? So when customers searching for, let's say, or generic product type. So let's say if I want to buy a lunchbox and I'm searching for this, right? I would see an X number of brands. And when you are, let's say when your brand or your product gets featured in some of these, it helps to build the overall brand recall. It helps in two ways. One is obviously if that transaction goes through, you earn a certain revenue. But even if that transaction doesn't go through or a customer decides to buy either somewhere else or decides to buy some other product, the brand recall is registered, which basically helps you to drive a repeat purchase, right? And that's where also some of our categories, coming to the specifics of home and kitchen or the houseware category, right? On the e-commerce part, I think the good part versus a lot of other industries is this is where we've seen the highest amount of repeat rate. So customers who bought from this category for us come and buy within a year. 1/3 of those customers basically come and repeat, right? So that repeat angle to this, or the repeat rate of this, basically helps you capitalize on some of these aspects and take this forward. So now probably I'll try to conclude my discussion to the piece of where, okay, it's all of this, but how do I nail this? So the idea here is basically we go through the entire flywheel or the journey where we list products, try to build, look at some of these nuances or trends, try to capitalize, and basically try to build more on, ideally you'd want to focus more on the final closure part, but even if not, then at least the consideration part or the piece where customers are spending the maximum time becomes important. So I think the key learning or takeaway is going to be overall, as a channel, this has emerged and has multiplied over time. As a player in the industry, I should ideally look at least going at the furthest in the value chain as much as we can, and some of the ingredients or pieces that we discussed become sort of drivers for this. So that's all from my side. We have obviously a stall here in case anyone wants to sort of have very specific discussion on how to get onboarded or start some of those questions. In case you have any questions for me, happy to take those offline. I'll be around for some time, so we can have an in-depth discussion some way, and happy to partner for those. Thank you for listening to me. It was a great conversation.